Welcome back to This Is Live, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. With me today, I have Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, as well as Professor Anthony Killer, Professor of Strategy and Development and Institute Director at the Commonwealth Institute of Advanced and Professional Studies, CIAPS. Last weekend's governorship contest in Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo states effectively ushered Nigeria into yet another electoral cycle, coming at a time that the nation is pretty much still dealing with the fallouts of a highly contentious general election. With similar exercises in Edo and Anambra states scheduled to come up in less than 2 years henceforth, have lessons been learned? In what way or ways has democracy been deepened as a result of how last weekend's off-cycle polls unfolded? With the majority now having its way, could it be said that the minority truly had its say? Or has it just been a case of rinse and repeat? Paul James, his programs manager at Yiaga Africa, is head of elections. His group monitored the elections across the 3 states in question. He joins me now for a quick overview of matters arising from those off-season polls. Good to have you on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. Paul James, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Ruben.
Well, Paul James, on Tuesday this week, or last week, if you like, I was arguing on the back page of this day newspaper that these off-cycle elections are not in any way different from the main elections. That is the same of the same. The same incredulous spectacle of impunity, criminality, capture, state capture. Because we saw the same thing, overvoting, intimidation, suppression of voting. And yet, this is supposed to be a smaller election, 5-point-something million voters in 3 states, 10,700 polling units. And the police, as usual, deployed over 300,000 policemen. Every senatorial district had a DIG, a commissioner of police. INEC deployed 27 commissioners, national commissioners, and yet it's the same of the same. What's your take on these off-cycle elections? Is it that elections can never be properly managed in Nigeria? What are the challenges that INEC seems incapable of addressing operationally and administratively?
Thank you, Mr. Ruben. If you can hear me, I think if there is one thing to celebrate from that election, it's only the fact that there was a return made, but even under questionable circumstances. But again, you are right. If you reflect back on the election, you'll see that it was a rollback from what we used to have as elections in the country. And what is very saddening about this is that the moment you begin to praise the institutions that are responsible for the election, and then you see in the next cycle of election, the institutions will just dash off completely. Because if we go back to the 2023 general election, for instance, a lot of concerns were raised about the conduct of the president, how INEC managed the presidential election, especially around communication, how we thought INEC was not forthcoming with communication. Again, we went into the state election that happened on March 18th. INEC improved on all fronts, from management of logistics, upload of resource, management of communication, and all of that. And then this election came also with a lot of promises, renewed hope, if you like, because in the build-up to the election, what we saw from the commission was the determination to give Nigeria the kind of election that we thought we wanted, because we saw in the build-up, for instance, that INEC intensified engagement with stakeholders. There were different levels of meeting that happened. I was privileged to attend some of them. And then also, if you think about even in terms of training, INEC commenced training of its staff early this time. As early as September, they had trained most of the staff that will be engaged in the process. INEC deployed non-sensitive materials also early. In fact, at some point, as early as the first week of October, they were already batched according to local government. They were already they had already dispatched them to the state, and they have been batched according to the local government in readiness for the election. Election week, of course, Commission also engaged stakeholders and made commitment to the fact that it has even deployed sensitive materials across the state to the racks. What they also did differently this time is that they even gave advanced resources to the electoral officers to activate the racks. With all of those promises, you think it is just a fact that stakeholders should just go home and rest, that the election is a done deal. But again, the election happened and we saw how it went. It was, for me, a rollback, like I said, from what we used to see, especially in the way the Commission managed the election and also in the application of its rules across all the election. For instance, if we take it on a case-by-case basis, we thought those elections happened under very difficult circumstances, because if you think about the three states and the challenges of conducting elections, Bayelsa, for instance, over 70% covered with water. Kogi, security crisis, election-related violence before the election. Imo also riddled with different forms of election-related violence. In fact, a security-related crisis. If you think about Imo, at some point the Commission even had to relocate its services temporarily from Osu local government to the INEC headquarters in Owerri. INEC only moved back to the local government in the week of the election, to the best that we know, because we were engaging them constantly. I was in a meeting with the Commissioner of Police in Imo. I was in a meeting with the INEC Electoral Commissioner in Imo, where they all made commitment that, yes, they were going to return back to the local government in the week of the election. But what I thought they didn't do well is managing communication around that, because a lot of persons were confused as to whether the Commission was going to conduct election in that local government. Election morning, what we saw in the local government was the fact that election did not happen at all in Osu local government, to the best that we know as observers, because we deployed observers to a representative random sample of 300 polling units across the state. And based on the sample and report that we got, election did not happen in Osu local government. What INEC did was to move all to have election concentrated in one location. Election happened according to what we heard in the INEC headquarters. There was no prior information from INEC to tell the people of Imo or to tell the voters in Osu that it was going to relocate voting from polling units to a central location. Okay. Granted, we know there was a security crisis in the local government, but we thought there should have been a prior communication and prior arrangement to voters so that they are not left stranded like we saw on election day. We had also reports from places like Oru local government in Imo State, Oru East, Oru West, where we thought also that election didn't happen in a lot of local polling units. But what did we see at the end? Returns were made from some of these locations where election did not happen. What is even very, very concerning is the fact that you will see, for instance, locations where you see for like 2 voters that are recorded on the beavers by motor voter registration system. By the time you compare with the paper trail, you realize that more than 50 persons or 100 persons had voted in the local government. If you go to Kogi, also the same concern, where we thought turnout was manipulated in some of the local government. If you pick some local governments like Adavi, like Okene, and you see turnout 100%, 101%, 102%. In those local government, over 99% of voters have picked up their permanent voters card. What does that tell you? That it is possible that voters cards were collected by proxy, and then it is also possible that some persons were ferried to the polling unit to just go and vote on election day. What is also worrying about Kogi was that the morning of the election, we started receiving reports from local governments like Ogorimagongo, Ajakuta, even Adavi, Okene, and some part of Lokoja about pre-filled election results. So you begin to wonder, at what point did this thing happen? In fact, some INEC staff that arrived at the local government also expressed concern. They were surprised, they were shocked that they did not know that the result sheet have been pre-filled before they arrive at the polling unit. So this cannot just happen. This cannot just be a mistake, because for us, we thought it was premeditated, it was pre-planned, because it did not just happen in an isolated location, across several polling units, causing INEC to even suspend election in about 56 of polling units in Kogi State.
Well, you are head of elections at Yiaga Africa, one of the civil society groups observing elections. Yesterday, I was one of the resource persons at a retreat for National Assembly members. Chairman, electoral matters of the Senate was there. Chairman, House Committee on Electoral Matters was also there, and members of the Senate and House of Representatives. One of the issues that the resource persons looked at was the value of recommendations by observers. Yiaga Africa is an observer group, and you have been observing elections throughout this 2023 cycle. Do you think anybody in Nigeria, the stakeholders, who constitute the authority in charge of elections, do you think they take the recommendations of observers seriously? Because I've seen the reports by Yiaga Africa, Situation Room, TAF Africa, CDDEAC, and all that. Does anybody listen to your observations, really?
I think they do, and sometimes it depends on who is making those recommendations. You think they don't know until you get into certain cycles and they begin to point fingers at you, you are the one disturbing us and all of that. I think they do. It's just, I'm running away from using that cliche, that political will to just do what is right by the people. For the commission, for instance, I was at a meeting with the INEC chair at some point where he mentioned specifically some recommendations that observer group have made and how the commission had implemented some of them. And then, like I said, even some of the stakeholders, security and all of that, I was privileged to be on a television program at some point with one of the DIGs. This was during the Ekiti election. And then I raised some concerns about some security reports that we had received. The DIG confirmed and corroborated our report that yes, they had received our report, and based on that, they were able to carry out some security mapping around those locations that we had highlighted. So, they may not come back to give credit to some of these groups, but because, I think sometimes sincerely, this group act as their informants. I wouldn't say that the institutions are not doing well as expected by the people, but Nigeria is large. The challenges are enormous. So sometimes I know they may also want to just cherry pick the one that they feel best serve their interests at that point in time. But I would say they are doing, but is it as effective as we expected? I would say not at all, because if you think even of this new electoral act that we have, there were inputs by stakeholders. For instance, the review on even participation of persons with disability. It was a painstaking effort by CSOs, by TAF Africa, like you mentioned, Yiaga Africa and the likes, to say that we have that review at least, so that there could be some reasonable consideration for persons with disability in our election. They are not to the level that we expected, but I think they are taking them. They are taking them one at a time.
Well, one of the issues arising from these off-season elections in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa was President Goodluck Jonathan, who, by the way, is celebrating his 66th birthday. And we use this opportunity to wish him a very happy 66th birthday. Even after office, he continues to remain relevant, and his example continues to shine across Africa. John Mahama in Ghana followed this example, and we've seen George Weah of Liberia also following his example, indicating that, look, power is not a do-or-die affair. And that's the kind of example that we hope will continue to endure in the democratic space. So congratulations to President Goodluck Jonathan. But in the course of the off-cycle election in Bayelsa, he made the point that can we do away? Can the National Assembly do something to do away with off-season elections? Is that possible? given the state of the law on the matter.
Exactly. So that has to be a constitutional matter here. I'll be honest with you, for some of us that have also been part of this, sometimes you go through election, you begin to ask yourself, so what? Or what next after this? Because it's like repeating the same thing over and over and you're expecting a different result. And then if you think about the enormous resources that go into managing an off-cycle election, you have just listed the number of personnel that INEC deployed, that security forces also deployed. Think about the logistics of even deploying this personnel, the logistics of mobilizing or demobilizing personnel when it comes to off-cycle election. I think we should come to that point where we need to tell ourselves the honest truth, that resources are shrinking. And then also, most times, this off-cycle election, to the best that we know, the incumbent will just dominate the space and don't provide that level playing field for every other stakeholder. As much as I know it also happens around national election, they are usually not as pronounced as you see when you go to, when the spotlight is on the state or when off-cycle election is happening. Look at what happened in the two states of Kogi and Imo, for instance, where we thought the space was closed because before the election, there was this obnoxious laws that they came up with in Imo State. Before you place a campaign poster, you need to pay like 54 million naira, or in Kogi, where to place a campaign poster will cost 1 million naira and then a caution fee of 50 million. So if you go to Imo, as of the week before the election, I was in the state, driving from the airport to the state capital, you only see one campaign poster up for the incumbent governor. And you begin to wonder, you got over 18 parties that were contesting the election in the state. You begin to wonder, where are other parties? There was no even chance for them to interact, to engage, to sell their ideas to the people because of those laws that the governors have. So it's time, I think, we need to check all of those excesses. And if the law is what can guarantee that, then we should go through the route of the law. But I think critically we need to look at this, that we should not, think about also how these elections are conducted. The moment it is election day, every other thing comes to standstill. Even before the election, the sort of preparation that goes into even conducting the election affects other planning. So I would say, if wishes were horses, sincerely I would go with the suggestion by President Goodluck Jonathan that perhaps we should try this, come to the place in this country, or time in this country where we'll just have all of this election conducted in one day. But that also has to come through the instrument of the law by the National Assembly.
Well, I'll come back to you. Just hold on and stay with us. We'll be right back. We have breaking news. The Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja has nullified the electoral victory of the Plateau State Governor, Caleb Mutfwang, of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, after stating that he wasn't qualified to run in the election. A three-member panel headed by Justice Elfrida Williams-Daudo, in a judgment Sunday, said Mutfwang was sponsored by a party without a structure, citing a Plateau State High Court decision which had previously dissolved the leadership of the PDP in the state. The court held that the PDP candidate was invalidly sponsored to run for governor, as the party neither held congresses at both the ward and local government levels. The judgment of the appeal court is in agreement with the appeal filed by Nentawe Goshwe, the governorship candidate of the All Progressives Congress APC in Plateau State governorship election. In the election, Mutfwang, on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, polled 525,299 votes, while Goshwe polled 481,370 votes in the March 18 Plateau State governorship election. Following its unanimous decision, the appeal court has also ordered that the certificate of return issued to Mutfwang be withdrawn and a fresh one handed to Goshwe, the now declared winner of the polls. The appellate court dismissed the judgment of a three-member panel of a tribunal headed by Justice Rita Irele Ifije, which had affirmed the election of the PDP candidate. At Rice News, we keep tabs on this development and provide updates. Well, we go back now to our guest, Paul James of Yiaga, Africa, who has been looking at the off-season elections in Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi states. Thank you very much for staying with us, Paul James. Okay, earlier on I was asking you a question about off-cycle elections. If you may just conclude your thoughts on that and the statement by President Jonathan.
Yeah, so I was just saying, whilst you have the spotlight on this state, a lot of things happen around the election that go unchecked. If you even cast your mind back to the build-up to the elections in those states, it's almost like we are in a theater of war, except for Bayelsa, that we had only one incident recorded in Nembe, I think on the 13th of September. Kogi State, one of the senatorial districts, was almost like election was not going to happen. It was constant clashes between the SDP and the APC. A state like Imo also, like I mentioned, if you recall, between 2019 and early 2023, February of 2023, INEC assets were attacked 54 times. 12 of those attacks were from Imo State. In fact, one was even in the INEC headquarters in Owerri. And so with all the security crises that also riddled the elections, there were concerns whether or not the commission was even going to conduct the election. And we saw how the election went. This was a state that has 27 local governments. But, I mean, you got Kogi that had 21 local governments, or Bayelsa that has 8 local governments. But for a state like Imo, in the morning of the Sunday after the election, by 10 a.m. already, the winner had gone to church to celebrate the victory from the election. Meaning, election had concluded in all the 27 local government, results have been collated and all of that. Even when some of these were under questionable circumstances, there was no even chance to review the conduct of those elections. And then, even for Kogi, like I had earlier highlighted, there were concerns about turnout in some of those locations where we thought turnout was suspiciously inflated. There was no chance again to review the election. Even when INEC had mentioned it had suspended election in some location and was going back to conduct election on November 18th. What we saw INEC did was to lean on this margin of date principle. And then at the end of the election, because the difference was huge between the major candidate in the election, INEC didn't go back to give the people in those 56 locations the chance to have a say in who becomes their governor. So all of this, if you look at this, there are also moral questions to this that we don't even get to answer. And so I thought, going through what Goodluck Jonathan has said, since sometimes to get this sort of international spotlight or international pressure when we do national election, all interest, all attention is focused on how to conduct those elections. Maybe we need to look at those directions. Maybe it will help to bring some sanity in the way elections are conducted at the subnational levels.
Well, Paul James, before I let you go, we have had general elections, we have had off-cycle elections, 7th general elections since return to civilian rule in 1999, 24 years since Nigerians said never again to military rule. But one of the major outcomes of the review of the 2023 electoral process is that we need to engage in further reforms, both of the Electoral Act and process, and also amendment of the 1999 Constitution. What are those key areas from the judgments so far, from the tribunals and the courts, that you think we need to focus upon going forward, particularly the National Assembly?
Well, I think if that is the major thing we need to focus attention on is the discussion around the institutional independence of INEC, the administrative independence of INEC, and that will come around the leadership recruitment process into INEC. What we thought is happening gradually is that process has been hijacked to the effect that before the 2023 election, there were some appointments that were made by President Buhari that the civil society raised some concern because we thought some of them had partisan inclination. The timing for those recruitment was very late, just about 5 months to the election. Some of the persons that were also recruited were persons that we thought had no experience in managing election. They had no time to even understand how elections are being conducted. And so they were just thrown into the ring like that with no prior knowledge, no prior preparation. And we saw how election went in some of the locations where they managed. In fact, for one of them that was deployed to Yiaga State, if you recall, the people of Yiaga even protested that deployment because of the antecedent of the person that was supposed to manage the elections. Now, this government came in also with a lot of promises. For the first set of appointment that the government will do, and also the first major election that the government will conduct, you see people are already raising concerns over those appointments and also how the elections went. Some of the appointments that happened are persons also that we thought are members of some political parties. Despite all the play and all of that, nothing happened. In fact, the review of this appointment didn't even go through the House committees like you mentioned. It was just debated at the Senate, and then the Senate just gave approval and nominated them. So I thought that is where we need to start from. We need to go back to review the Constitution that gave power was so much to the president about appointing persons into INEC. Well, there have been suggestions, if you go back to the Justice Uwe's committee recommendation.
Paul James, sorry to interrupt you. We need to go very quickly to Plateau State, where a press conference is taking place.
And he has been declared as the lawfully elected governor of Plateau State. And INEC has been ordered to give him his certificate of return. Therefore, we are very, very happy with the judgment. We listened to it with rapt attention. It covered so many areas. We advise members of the public to please read the judgment first before some people begin to have negative views of it. In addition, the court also dismissed the cross appeal filed by the PDP. They said it lacks merit. They also upheld our objection to the competence of the cross appeal filed by the PDP because they did not even compile the records. So today, we are very, very happy, and we thank the people of Plateau State for reposing confidence in Dr. Nentawe Yiaga. We urge them to be peaceful and law-abiding and to await the swearing in of Dr. Nentawe as the duly elected governor of Plateau State.
But then people are arguing that this is a pre-election matter.
I said it. If you follow the judgment, it was very, very clear. The court said, go and read section 134, sub 1 of the Electoral Act. It is very, very clear that this is a post-election matter. Being a post-election matter, it means that the course of action for anyone who is not a member of the PDP starts from the day of the election. I think this is one area that many people do not understand. It would have been a pre-election matter for aspirants or members of the PDP. But any other candidate from any other party will wait until the election. Then what will qualify him is the fact that he has contested and he says PDP was not qualified to contest. And what made PDP not qualified to contest? The court said they have been found to have disobeyed serially series of judgments of Plateau State High Court and the Court of Appeal. The other judgments were to the effect that PDP, you don't have a structure. Once you don't have a structure, it means you do not even have a party to even sponsor a candidate. So if you cannot sponsor a candidate, it means you do not in law exist. So as a matter of fact, all the votes given to the PDP were declared to be wasted votes, meaning Dr. Nentawe's votes were the valid votes. Therefore, having satisfied the requirements of the law, he has been returned as the duly elected governor of Plateau State. Edward Pajok, SAN, together with my learned friends here. Thank you.
Well, counsel to Goshwe, the APC gubernatorial candidate in Plateau State, who has just been declared validly elected winner of the gubernatorial election in that state and the appeal court sacking Muftwang, who until now had been the governor of that state.
Okay, on behalf of the third respondent, that's the PDP, the judgment was not unexpected because we've seen the line of decisions of this particular panel. It should be noted that Plateau State is the only state where a dedicated panel was made available for all their appeals. In other jurisdictions, in other states, panels are set up for individual appeals, but in respect of Plateau State, this panel was set up and they are trying all the appeals. They are hearing all the appeals from Plateau State, which of course raises an issue of whether this is in line with the procedure adopted by the court. Another issue we find wrong with the judgment is that the lower tribunal, the trial tribunal, actually dealt with a petition that raised issue of invalidity of nomination and sponsorship of second respondent as the governor of Plateau State. But on appeal, and they found that his nomination was valid. On appeal, the appellants actually formulated grounds that restricted themselves to the issue of sponsorship. And we raised the issue that what is being had in this court is different from what the tribunal had. The tribunal had a case of nomination and sponsorship and made a finding on it. Appeals are by way of rehearing. You cannot make a case and the tribunal tries a case at the lower tribunal based on one or two issues, and you come to the Court of Appeal and you change the game. We all know that consistency is the name of the game when it comes to litigation. Now, we drew attention of the appeal court to this fact that they have changed their case. Their case is no longer nomination and sponsorship, but sponsorship. Today in the judgment, we did not hear anything about nomination. Everything that was said in this court today was about sponsorship. And of course, we know that when you mention sponsorship, it could be pre-election or post-election. But when you talk about nomination, the courts do not have any jurisdiction to entertain it as a post-election matter. And so what we had today is not what we went through at the tribunal. We wait to see the judgment so that we will do the needful. But we thank their lordships for their industry. At least they came up with something. And we also prayed them to release the judgment so that we will study the judgments and come up with our grounds of appeal, because we know that our clients have given us the go-ahead to appeal this judgment. It is sad that a day like this has come, because we know that much as the governor has an opportunity to test this judgment at the Supreme Court, the members of the House of Assembly that are with him cannot go beyond this court. And so the untimely death that they met here cannot be appealed, cannot be tried upstairs. And so it's sad, but we thank God for today. Thank you.
Sir, you are counsel to the PDP.
Yes.
One of the grounds for qualifying the election was that your party lacked structure. Given the state of affairs in the PDP,
I did, under adumbration, say to the court that the tribunal found that there was a repeat Congress. It's a finding, that's number one. And assuming without conceding that there was no structure, you cannot put the cart before the horse. In paragraph 4A of the appellant's reply to second respondent's reply to the petition, they said that the nomination and the sponsorship of the second respondent, as the governor of Plateau State, is invalid by reason of those court orders. So before you apply the effect of the court orders, you first of all satisfy the court that the issue of nomination is well domiciled in the court, that they have jurisdiction. If they lack jurisdiction to venture into nomination, the effect of the orders, including structure, cannot be had by the court. And that is our position.
But sir, if there was another Congress, like you said from the findings,
yes,
the court said only 5 local government areas had exhibits to this point, and other 12 had none.
We did canvass that at the trial tribunal. Before the election, nobody challenged the result of the Congress. Nobody did challenge the result of the Congress. So going into the election, that Congress was hale and hearty. There was no invalidation. So to now challenge it after the election is wrong. It is wrong. So we're saying that that Congress was in place and the court found it to be in place. Thank you.
Your name, sir, sorry?
Emeka Itiaba, SDM.
Welcome back to this is the live the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. We just covered the developing situation with regard to the ruling of the Court of Appeal with regard to the governorship election March 18 in Plateau State, with the Court of Appeal declaring Goshwe of the All Progressives Congress as the validly elected person and declaring that Governor Muftwang of the PDP was elected without a structure. And to that extent, nothing stands on nothing. And that the certificate of return should be given to the gubernatorial candidate in that election of the All Progressives Congress. But from what Counsel to Governor Muftwang had said, it is obvious that the PDP in Plateau State gubernatorial election will be going all the way to the Apex Court. So the matter is not over yet. But today, that has been the breaking news. Let's go back to our guest, Paul James, Head of Elections at Yiaga Africa. Paul James, I wanted you to just talk about reforms arising from the 2023 general elections and the off-cycle elections November 11 in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa. If you could just summarize so that we'll move on quickly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. So I was just saying, the first is the constitutional reform, and that has to also do with appointments into INEC. I know the last time there was the suggestion by the Justice Uwais Committee that should also be channeled through the National Judicial Council. Some persons have raised, as much as that has yet to be implemented, some have even raised concerns about who are going to constitute the body of those making appointment from the NJC. But I think while we look towards, if possible, look towards that direction, my appeal will be to also begin to think about how we can throw this up to Nigerians first to even make the nominations before they go through those processes, or even before the government will nominate and the National Assembly will confirm. I think that is the first to start. The second is, if you look at through our electoral act, if you think how that came into being, we thought that process was even rushed by the National Assembly and all of that, to the effect that at some point we thought they should change themselves. If you think that they were not even able to participate in their party primaries, because what we have in the Electoral Act only permits delegates to nominate people for party primaries. So it tells you that there's a lot of lacuna in the Electoral Act, as it were, that we need to go back and begin to look at how to review. Even on the part of INEC, the new act as we have leaves a lot of discretion for the commission, especially in the application of some of the electoral law. So across different polling units, you see different interpretation. As in some places, even the confusion about this electronic transmission, not transmission, and all of that. I think the law should be explicit and be in black and white in a manner that everybody will understand. I have participated in over 45 national elections, both in Nigeria and outside of Nigeria, and I have not seen a complicated electoral law like the one we have in Nigeria. So I think we need to keep it simple so that all of these ambiguities that we're seeing and the technicalities that come with interpreting them will be put to rest. Just look at what is happening in Plateau State, for instance, and other states as well. I thought these are issues that should already have been settled long even before we go into the election. And so elections are done with, and then you you begin to see tensions also that will come from the conduct of those elections because you are waiting for the final arbiter to make judgment based on the outcome of the election. So it is not, for me, we shouldn't be doing this part of just subjecting our elections to the courts, waiting until what the court decides before we know we have a conclusion on the conduct of our elections. So we need to go back and look within our laws. We thought the process as we have at the moment is also not inclusive. A lot of discretion is left to the political parties, especially around how they regulate some of their processes. At some point when they were putting together this electoral act, civil society have made suggestions if we could even have some peg around how much the parties should charge for nomination forms and all of that. But at some point, what we heard from the presidency was like, no, this should be an internal party affair, and so it should not be dictated. But I think it is time we go back and to begin to look through those directions because we thought it closed off the space and truly did not allow a good representation or an inclusive electoral process. I had made a point about Kogi and Imo State about how we thought because of some of the laws that the government came up with, it limited participation for other parties. As much as that may also be seen as a party or the state affair, I think the reform that we're also looking at should also begin to look towards that direction of how to begin to cut off some of those excesses in our elections.
Well, on that note, Paul James, I would like to thank you very much for joining us today on this Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Paul James is Program Manager, Head of Elections at Yiaga Africa.